Hi everyone, my name is Pierre-Hugues. I'm a senior IT consultant and the author on Java EE support patterns. Today's tutorial will be for Java beginners and will be about probably the most common exception that you will see in your Java career, which is java.lang.NullPointerExceptions. In order for you to understand this problem, we're going to provide you with a simple Java program which we're going to show you the exception and how you can resolve it. So let's get started. So what you see here is a very simple program that we created. So it's called null pointer simple program. So I will assume that you're a Java beginner, right? So you're fairly new to this whole Java and Java EE Enterprise, or probably you're doing other development, could be on Android or other platforms. But I will assume that you're fairly new. So in this case, you can see our program. It's a simple Java class that we named null pointer simple program. We define two string fields, very simple, with their getters and setters, right? So far so good, right? Then what we did, we create a simple main method. And in this main method, what we're simply doing is creating a new instance of this class, right? We're setting the first field to a string value. Typical thing that you would do. But then what we're doing, we're basically calling in a method called do something, which you can see here. This method will basically just be returning null, and we'll be returning the same object instance type of this class, right, which is null pointer exception simple program. So basically it means the object instance will be returning null, and then what we're trying to do is, again, using the same object instance from our class, we're going to try to execute this time the set field 2, which is our second field to set a string value. Okay, so let's see how. So very simple program, just initializing a field, calling in a method, getting a null, trying to execute a second method, right? So very basic program. So let me execute that right now. As I remember, the goal is to explain null pointer exceptions. So we're going to see, okay, there we go. So if you look in the console, you will see we got null pointer exception, which is the scope or content of our session today. As you can see, it was generated at this line, 48, when we try to call set field 2, right? Why? Well, let me run again the program in debug mode this time. It's always best to learn, by the way, on simple example, and always try to use the debugger as well when you can. This will show you exactly what's going on. So as we can see, our instance of object was initialized properly, right? Very simple allocation. Now we did set up our first field, right? So we have field 1 set up with our string value, and now we're calling in do something. So if you look, object instance is still initialized to that object ID, right, with that address. Then we execute the do something method, which is returning null. Then what happened? You see our object instance is now null because we executed that method. It could be anything, right? You could be calling in a method trying to get a connection from a database, could be trying to parse a file, and eventually you may end up with a method returning you a null value. This is what you will get. And later on you try to execute another method on a null object and bang. Now you see a null pointer exception, you see, which is thrown. Why? Because a null pointer simply means that you're trying to execute a method from an instance, an object instance, which is now null. Basically, the reference of the object is now null. As you can see, it could happen for many reasons. It could be like in this case, you're calling in a method, you're getting a null, but typically that's a quite common problem. So how can you fix that? Well, obviously you have to figure out the root cause. So root cause means you have to understand why you're getting null at the first place. So you will have to do some deeper debugging to understand why you're getting null. So in this case, we're going to fix the program, okay? So we're just going to return a new instance like this, rerun the program, right, in debug state so you can see again. This time, oh, look at this. Do something now is returning me a new instance, you see? And this time the program can execute with no problem. So we're able to set the new value with no problem. Now if I go back to the null, obviously now the program, again, it's failing back with a null pointer exceptions. Now obviously the root cause is to understand why you're getting null in the first place, but you can still mitigate the impact at some level depending on how you design your program by adding some validation as well. So your program could be fault tolerant in a way that you can do some validation and allow the program to behave more gracefully than trying to catch a null pointer exception, obviously. So what we're going to do next is add validation to our object instance. So that's, as I said, one way to mitigate the impact and add proper validation. It's always a best practice to make sure you're then dealing with null value, especially for critical piece of code. So in this case, we can see it's very simple, right? Basically, we validate if the object is not null before we attempt to execute the method, right? So especially if you're, for example, if you're designing code and you're suspecting that this code may return null, it's always best practice to add some validation so you can gracefully recover from this condition. So in this case, we don't execute this method if it's null, and else obviously we're going to print some error detail. It could be, obviously could be using any logger like log4j or others, and then you will be able to provide some error handling to your to basically your support individuals which are supporting your application. So if I rerun the program with this, you see this time we don't get any null pointer exception, right? We just get that basically line, and if we run that and with the debugger, you again see what's happening, right? So back to our program, the instance is null from the do something, and then look, we have validation here. Since it's null, we're switching in the else statement, and then we just simply print that line to the program. So bottom line, I hope you have enjoyed this small tutorial. That source is available from my blog in the article you see on your screen. You can either type the address in, or you can search for null pointer exception. You should find my article in the top 5 from Google there. So basically, bottom line to remember is make sure you understand the root cause of null pointer exceptions. Basically, what process or what code is generating you the null pointer as the first place, and second of all, best practice, add some null pointer null validation for critical pieces of your code. It's always a best practice so you can recover gracefully under some scenarios. Alright, so I hope you enjoyed this short tutorial, and have a good day. Thank you.